the hottest topic in the industry, which I think it has been for as long as we started billing time, is time. It's it's a fun topic to discuss because I think whether we're sitting here having this conversation today or sitting here having it 100 years ago, the complaint is the same. I don't have time. I don't have enough time. So that's the topic of our conversation today. Opening thoughts on that without even a question to ask you. Opening thoughts on what comes to mind on this topic.
It's interesting that we all have the same amount of time, and yet some people achieve so much with the time they have compared to somebody else who, with the same amount of time, they achieve so much less. And
Mm.
so, what's the difference? Why can some people achieve so much and others not as much? Looking back on my own life, I looked at all the things I've done, and then I go, wow, how did I have time to do all that? And it was an interesting self-assessment. And I've always said that the difference between successful people and not so successful people is how they think about things. And I guess over the years, I've always thought about how I can leverage what I was doing. Take accounting, for example, you have a choice of either seeing the clients, doing the consultation, and I call that playing the P&L game. Sure, you trade your time for money, and you get some money for it, or you can invest your time into balance sheet activities, and balance sheet activities will create revenue streams and from the effort that you put in. And it's more about invisible money that you create compared to visible money you create. But then the way you think about things determines how you spend your time, because if you think about trading time for money, you'll stay in consulting to your clients. But if you think about the investment in the balance sheet, then you'll spend time developing systems, teaching people, training staff so that they can deliver the service to the client. So if you were to deliver the service to your client, you might be able to see 100 clients. But if you had five senior client managers delivering to each of them to five clients, and that's 500 clients that you've been able
Mhm.
to reach. It starts with how you think as to where you spend your time, whether it's instinctive or whether, I got taught, or whether some people do it instinctively. Some people do it instinctively and others have to be taught.
Yeah, no, I want to go to the core of it because no one seems to be immune to this apart from the people who finally get it. And as you say, find the elixir, and then the success is heavily predicated on the fact that they own their own time and they've found the formula. But what's the core issue here? Are we not taught how to manage our time properly? Or are we, when we look at owner dependency on businesses, there's a big chunk of the debate is, we think we need to do everything, so then we don't have any time because we're having to do everything. What for you, when we look at it and boil it right down, what are the core issues with this?
I guess most of us are reactive. Most of us uh, deal with things as they come up. So we're reacting to it. And when we go to university or we go to school, we're taught to be an accountant, to be a lawyer, to do the task. So we learn how to do the task. But the task is only limited to the hours in a day. And we're not taught how to leverage that time. We're taught
Hmm.
how to, do the work, but that's not where the real leverage is. The real leverage is teaching somebody else to do the task and developing systems and training people. That's where the real leverage comes from. But we're not taught to do that. So I guess it's, partly we're reactive, partly, our education system doesn't teach us how to think that way.
So you found yourself in the same predicament, right? Many years ago, you're working 80, 100 hours a week on this business that was meant to give you more time and freedom. And
Mm.
there was a turning point there. And many of the people listening into this or reading this will be in the same predicament that you were in, feeling trapped in their business, feeling like they don't have time for the things that they want to do. But when
Yeah.
you're in that predicament, it's very hard, like a fish can't see water. It's very hard to see the way out. So for someone sitting there working 80, 100 hours a week on their business, feeling engulfed by it, how do you look at a pathway of getting yourself out of that and working towards a state of having more time and freedom?
Yeah, it wasn't easy. It started with your mindset, and I grew up being taught to work hard, and you just got to work really hard. And I thought that I just have to put in the hours, but then there is only so many hours in a day, and once you've hit those hours in a day, you can't get any more time from anywhere else, and that's it. So you got to start thinking smarter, not work harder.
Mm,
And I guess I drew inspiration from people, successful people, books. I read a book called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber that changed the way I looked. I had a friend that ran a very large accounting firm, and I ran a very small accounting firm, but I was working 3 times the hours that he was working and thinking that was the right way to go. And he started helping me think about the balance sheet, not the P&L. And I wasn't thinking like that. I was just thinking, this is the way I was brought up, work hard, put the hours in. And that kept me in that lane, if you like, of working
yeah.
hard. You know how they say, if the pain isn't great enough, then you don't look for solutions. The pain got to an extent where I just couldn't keep going this way because, working 80, 100 hours a week is not sustainable long term. And so typically you do the things like, oh, it must be greener on the other side. Oh, it must be another business that's better than this. And I see that with clients, when things get hard, tough, then they think that by changing industries that it's easier in another industry. But a book that really helped me think opposite to that is that Think and Grow Rich by
Mhm.
Napoleon Hill. He said the gold is in your own backyard. It's not in somebody else's backyard. So stop looking there. Look for the gold in your own backyard. A series of different books and influences that taught me to start focusing. Another one was, you're not good at anything until you've done it for 10,000 hours. And a lot of people get to 6,000 hours and they jump ship, and they really haven't mastered that task, and then they jump ship and then they start all over again, and then when it
Mhm.
gets a bit harder then they jump ship again, so they keep jumping ship and they never get to that 10,000 hours until you're really, really efficient and effective at what you do. So it was just a combination of all of that that helped change my thinking and my mindset. And thank goodness, because I would have sold the practice, jumped into another industry, but not changed how I did things, and I would have replicated the exact same problems I had in the new business that I'd go to, because I hadn't, I was just addressing the symptoms, not the problem, and the problem was the way I was thinking about the business.
I think that's a really important point to make because I think it is a trap a lot of us fall into is thinking, well, it's the business, it's the nature of the business. It's an accounting firm. I sell time, so I'm always going to be time struck and not have any time. And many are looking for an out, sell the firm, get out, go and do something different. But time and time again, and it's exactly what you've said. They go to the next venture, and sure enough, they're in the same predicament very quickly on. So that I think
Yes.
the point on your thinking, unless that's addressed, the same symptoms will rise to the surface, won't they?
Yes, absolutely. And you'll hear the same excuses. And I've heard excuses from, I've got different clients to you, and I can't find staff, and that's the problem. Well, everyone can't find staff,
Mm.
I know a very good friend of mine, he's a general practitioner, and he's a doctor, and he said to me, I can't find staff. Your industry is easy. You can find staff, but I can't find staff. So and I hear that right across the board. But
Mhm.
and then I asked him, well, how have you tried to find staff? And he said, oh, it's just ask around and ask friends and all that. And well, that's not a system. If you're serious about running a business, you've got to have a system of recruiting, not just do it by chance. A system is, you've got a selection method, how you select the right person, because you can often select the wrong person. and
Hmm.
you've got to, invest money into advertising, keep an ad in for 6 months, 12 months to keep bringing in leads, and then you've got to screen them and have a recruitment process, because often you might get the leads in, but your process is wrong and you end up recruiting the wrong person. And for those who break through that, because every business is faced with that, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, but the ones that have been able to break through, and it's a mindset thing, they put a process in place, they expect to have difficulties and so forth, as opposed to the other person who, the first roadblock they come to, they give up, and they
Yeah.
say it's too hard. So
Yeah.
again, that's a mindset thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thought too. Is it's what got us to 80 plus hours.
Mm.
We're not just going to get out of that or unravel that easily or quickly. So we have to be willing to go through a little bit of pain, but to have a system there is the important thing. Let's say, okay, we've gotten to that point where the pain of staying the same, is greater than the pain of change. We've addressed the fact that we need to change our thinking. So let's talk about the system a little bit because, we love a good framework here at Wise. We love a
Mhm.
good system to lean on. And one of the systems we built to buy back time is the withdrawal journey. You've taught us over the years that we have to systematically withdraw from certain divisions from the business in a certain order. And that's heavily attached to the 7 divisions of the org chart. I just think this provides a lot of clarity on the pathway to buying back time. I think it gives people a step-by-step methodical approach. So if you wouldn't mind just we don't have to go into super detail, but a higher glance view of your system on this would be great.
Absolutely. And I've always said it starts with your mindset. Most accountants, me included, are perfectionists. We need to have control and everything needs to be perfect.
Hmm.
So I had to get myself into a mindset where I had to say to myself that 80% well and done by somebody else is good enough versus it had to be done 100% and it had to be done by me. So if I had to choose between 80% or 100%, but it had to be done by me, then in my mindset, I had to accept that 80% is good enough. Right.
Hmm.
And the way I got around that is because I accepted that I was more of a perfectionist. Often the clients are not at my perfection level and they don't want to be. They're just happy to have it done at a particular level. I had to get my mindset down to that so that I can trust that the work is done by somebody else and I'm happy and the client's happy with that. It was just all within my own mindset that needed to be done at a particular level. So that's the first thing. And then if you can get over that, which is probably the hardest thing for most accountants to get over, you've got to then focus on the balance sheet, not the profit and loss, which is you've got to teach these people how to do these things because they can't do it on their own. So
Mm.
where you spend your time is important. Do you spend it doing the work or do you spend it teaching someone to do the work? And it's much more an investment if it's spent on teaching somebody else to do the work. And the withdrawal process that I experienced myself is that as you grow your firm, you've got to withdraw yourself from certain tasks. And the first task that I withdrew myself from is from the administration. So you look at it's a balance of cost and training, the effort to train another person, and the availability of the staff. So the easiest staff, the cheapest staff, easiest one to train up is an admin person. So you bring that person in and they take all the administration off your plate. Right. So that's the first process. And then I had to think about the wages that I was going to pay this person as an investment, not as a cost or an
Hmm.
expense. So that was the other battle I was having. So, as an accountant, I saw everything as a cost or an expense, not as an investment. The way I convinced myself of doing that, especially with an administration person, is different if it's an accountant because they're actually producing work for you. They generate revenue, right? But
Yeah.
an admin person is an overhead. And the way I justified to myself that it's an investment is that it allowed me to do more and I can bring in more income. And even after paying their wages, I was ahead. So I had to look at things as not as an expense on its own, but the whole picture. There is
Hmm.
expense, yes, but there's income. And you take one off the other, and what you're left with now is you've got to value that. So I was able to convince myself that that investment allowed me to see more clients, earn more money, and the net effect was I was ahead. That's the first withdrawal step. And the second one, of course, was to invest into an accountant to do the work. And that was a little bit easier. Well, it was easier and it was harder. It was easier because this person generated income. So it was like a salesperson is generating income. So that was the easy bit. The difficult bit was I was a perfectionist and I needed everything to be done perfectly. So that was the next step you got to withdraw from. And of
Yeah.
course, you notice that I'm withdrawing from the lowest cost expense item in the organization. So now I'm left with seeing the clients. And I can charge the most when I see the clients on strategy work and tax planning and that kind of thing and relationship building. So that was the highest value to the organization. So I removed the lowest cost expense items, moved it off my plate and onto somebody else. And then I kept withdrawing to then work further up the value chain, if you like,
Hmm.
until now. The next one, the next hardest person is the senior client manager who took the role of seeing the clients. So that was an important role because it's a relationship. That business that we're in is about relationships. And now I'm passing the relationship from myself onto another person. And that comes with a huge amount of vulnerability. As your business transition from self-employment to a business, when you're self-employed, it's like you're the butterfly catcher and you're catching butterflies. You're getting referrals because you're doing the work. It's you, it's your personality that's bringing the work in. But then when it comes to business, it's no longer you. You're no longer the butterfly catcher. So you wanted to
Hmm.
create a garden that attracts butterflies. So now it's the brand, it's the business that brings the work in because you don't want a business that relies on butterfly catchers because if the butterfly catcher leaves, then that's the end of your growth strategy. So you need to create a garden that attracts the butterflies. So I spent time there trying to create a garden that attracts the butterflies. And once that was working and leads were coming in and my garden was attracting butterflies, then I can then step back from that. And then I'm just on the board. The organization, the accounting firm was run by, someone that is now trained up as the general manager or the CEO to run that firm. And I just became a investor.
I love that journey, and I really like the systematic approach because I think it gives people that clear pathway. Simple, but it's not easy. Moving to the other side of the spectrum here, we started talking about that overwhelming, inundated 80 plus hours a week. I also think there's a fear on the other side of that spectrum of, okay, if I do free myself up from all this work that I've been doing and the 80 plus hours a week, and I've got nothing to do, I wake up and there's nothing in my calendar. There's a fear around that, which I think stops people from actually getting to that point. So we so I just want you to address that one because it's not like we are freeing ourselves to a point where we may be working a couple of days a week and then we're sitting on the beach for the rest of the week. That doesn't normally end well. What are we ultimately, from a mindset perspective, how should we be thinking on the other side of that in terms of what we do with our time?
Sure. Look, everybody's different, and I'll cover the two situations. For me, I was quite happy to get to a situation where the firm was running on its own and it was just an investment to me, and I was getting a passive income each
Hmm.
month. For those who love what they do, the wonderful thing is that you can create a business that works. So you can decide what you want to do in that business. So, from my experience, most accountants love the relationship with the client, the consultation and all that. So you could choose to just do that and they'll give you a lot of job satisfaction. But everybody's different, like I got to a point where it was running on its own. So I then went and built another business and I ended up building 10 Channel offices around Australia. And that's what drove me. But I didn't need to do that. I could have just stayed in my practice and just saw clients, consulted to them as a client manager, as a senior client
Hmm.
manager. Or I could have just stayed as a CEO in my business and made sure that everything was working well. I had to make sure that the training was done, the client managers were trained properly, the production managers were trained properly, and made sure that I recruited the right people to sit in the right seats in that bus. So my job in building this business is more about building teams rather than doing the technical work, jumping there and doing the work, is recruiting people and building these teams building the marketing so that, it fed the teams that I was building, and that's how you leverage it. So you could grow it that way as well. It's all about doing the things that you love to do.
You enjoy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And for me, the thing that made me happy was the things that grew the business. I was good at doing that. So I looked at everything as a return on my time, and building the business was the best way to use my time. But there is also, I call it profit and loss and balance sheet, working a profit and loss statement or working a balance sheet. Some people talk about, visible money and invisible money. So an investment you can't see, it's working on your balance sheet. It's invisible, but
Yeah.
often people can't see the value in that. So it's a bit like, investing in a investment property. The capital growth of it you can't see. And if you're just focused on the rent that you're collecting, you miss the big picture. So
Hmm.
running your firm, it's the same thing. If you're building your business, if you're just looking at the cash flow and the profit, and you're not looking at the balance sheet, then you're missing half the picture. So if you can understand that, if your turnover is going up and the value of your business is going up, your balance sheet's going up, your investment is going up. It's invisible, yes, but it's still there. Just getting someone to think the right way is quite difficult sometimes.
It's huge. So I want to end this conversation on the current state of the industry, where there's a lot of noise around AI and its impact or an impending impact on the industry. But as you know, we've been told for as long as time that our profession is going to be extinct and technology is going to take over. And with every advent of technology, it's meant to give us all this time back, Ed. We're meant to be much faster and we're meant to be way more efficient, and we should be able to sit with our legs up and let the tech do the work. We're still yet to see that. So I'd love to get your thoughts on, is AI different, or does it come back still to that mindset? Like, is AI just going to make us busier and have less time, or go, I'd just be keen to get your parting thoughts on that.
Yes, well, I think that, from when I went to university, I was told that don't become an accountant because computers were just coming in back then and I'd be out of a job. And of course, computers created more jobs, right? But all it did was reduce the labor. You go from, say, an abacus to a calculator to a
Mhm.
computer. So it's reducing the manual labor in it. But ultimately, the relationship with the client was the most important thing. And AI is part of that. And AI is going to reduce the manual labor as well. So that leaves more time to deal with your client, and that makes that relationship a lot more healthy. I don't think ever get rid of that. I think that yes, the manual labor, the machines and the computers and the AI will make that a lot more efficient. And yes, we won't need as many accountants to do the work, but our industry is growing constantly, and every new technology produces more opportunities. And yes, it will change the nature of the industry, but there's always going to be jobs. I mean, I've been in the game a long time, and as long as as long as our unemployment is below 5%, that's full employment. And
Mhm.
as long as our GDP grows by 2.5-3% a year, that increases the pie and that creates the jobs. And we've been doing that. So, our country has been growing by that level every year, and we're always short of staff. I mean, I've never known in my lifetime, despite the fact that with the technology that's come in, the software like Zero, it's made the manual labor a lot more efficient, and the number of accountants that we've needed, we've reduced the number of accountants we've needed. But the business has always grown. There's always we're always short. We can't find enough staff. We can't
Yeah.
find enough accountants. So I've never in my whole life. It's always there's just not enough accountants out there to find. So that's never been a problem, and I don't believe it will be, even with the AI industry coming in.
So you've just touched on something there, which I think would be remiss not to mention, talk about quickly. Delegation. So we've touched on it, this conversation, without explicitly saying it, but delegation's such a fundamental part of this process of buying back your time. We're running a workshop in a couple of weeks called the Wize Buy Back Your Time method. And a big part of that workshop is around how to properly delegate. So I just love your parting thoughts on that. And if you're happy to give a little plug as to why someone actually should attend that workshop with us at Wize in a couple of weeks' time, if they're feeling in any way like they don't have time to do the things they want to do in life.
Oh, that's an easy one. If you want to produce more with less time or with less effort, you need to learn delegation as opposed to abdication. There's a confusion between delegation, someone delegating and someone abdicating. When you're abdicating, your focus is just on getting that task done, right? No, well, when you're delegating, you're investing in that person. So you're thinking investment. When you're abdicating, you're thinking P&L, got to get done as quick as possible, get the outcome, and then move on to the next job, right? Whereas when you're thinking delegation, you're investing in that person, training that person, making sure that that person has the skills in order to do that job better and constantly improving. And that thinking is the difference between the two. But the one that gives you the most return and allows you to do more with less is delegation. So if you get your mindset around, I've got to delegate, not abdicate, then you end up being able to produce more with less and it's such an important part because you can't scale your business, you can't leverage your business
Mhm.
if you don't learn the skills of delegation. So I'd encourage everyone to come to it if you want to do more with less.
Brilliant. Ed, as always, it's been great to get some of that gold out of your head. So thank you for sharing. And whenever you want to talk about time, you know where to do it because I don't think this challenge is going away anytime soon. But thank you
It's
for,
always been
imparting.
yes. No, thank you for having me. We'll see you at the next one.